here with us. And the panel that we have today has two extraordinary artists who we've had the privilege of working with in this Biennale, Yazan Khalili and Elyas Alavi. A round of applause for them. Thank you very much. In the Biennale, we've explored many kinds of processions and choruses, and language has been a very important part of this. But language not just as a site of memory, as a site of expression or cultural roots, but also how does language get spatialized? How does language start to define the place we come from and define the characteristics of landscapes, of places, but also more importantly of displacements? How do language create language worlds, right? And how do we inhabit those language worlds, but how do others inhabit those language worlds with us? And so this is expressed in many parts of the Biennale exhibition, but particularly in the second hall, the Hall of Chants, where we are looking at choruses, at visual languages, at oral languages, at ancient extinct languages, but also algorithms, as well as large language models. And that's where Yazan Khalili's work comes in, and we'll hear more about it. But as we keep going further into the Biennale, we again encounter sounds through a very different kind of an atmosphere environment, which goes into the space of a forest of echoes. And this is the different ecosystems, the multiple ecosystems jostling with one another, in which sound, voices, songs are kind of carriers of history, but also a multiplicity of identities. And so across Hall of Chants and Forest of Echoes, we have works by Yazan and Elyas Alavi discussing the complexities of what it means to belong in the condition of displacement many a time. Sometimes you're displaced in language. Agha Shahid Ali, this famous poet who was exiled from Kashmir and lived in New York for the longest time, used to refer to Faiz Ahmed Faiz, another poet who was a major political figure, and both of them were very interested in what does it mean if you're an exile, if you're exiled from language. And so Agha Shahid Ali would write in English a genre of poetry called the ghazal, which is lyric poetry. He did not write in Urdu, even though he was born in Urdu and felt exiled from Kashmir, but also exiled from Urdu, and then writing the ghazal form. I'm audible, right? Yes? Okay. So in this panel, titled "In the Quiet Plains of This Country, You Can Still Hear the Sounds of Our Voices," we're trying to touch on some of these ideas because it's a quote actually from a beautiful work by Elyas Alavi that we'll hear about. And as I mentioned how this panel is situated in the Biennale, there's something incredible if you have a chance to see their works or when you hear them speak about it, that's happening in the way they reclaim language, on the one hand, from erasure. Elyas's work has this interesting relationship of how do we reclaim identity in language when it's being erased? And Yazan's work does that in a completely opposite environment when there's a flood, a kind of deluge of language in the environment of AI and ChatGPT. How do you reclaim language in the time of language flooding, right? Language is kind of flooding the zone. And there's something common that is in both of their practice, that the way they try to reclaim language and identity, on the one hand from erasure, and on the other from this flood, is through poetry. And so we're going to hear from them how they approach these subjects in their work. But I think I'm going to start with something very simple. I'm not going to give an intro to them because they're both artists. They're both in the Biennale. You can read about them. And we want to, in the interest of time, hear them speak about their work. So I'm going to start with Elyas. If you can describe your work in this Biennale, what is it doing? How did it come together?
Thank you, Sabih. First of all, big thank you to you and Noura for inviting me for this, to be part of this amazing Biennale, and so many connections and friendships made during this Biennale. And yeah, it's been really, for me, it's been really important. My work's been seen in this context, and especially in this region. And there are lots of connections between my work and here. I wanted to literally simply show some images just show like what how I started this project. So there are some. Oh, actually, I can use this one. The other way. Oh, perfect. So I live in Australia, and I went there as a refugee, and there's lots of conversation, especially during the days like so-called Australia Day, where especially communities from the multicultural backgrounds are encouraged to celebrate. And this is a day where for the First Nations and the indigenous people, it marks the start of a big genocide. But for many years, like even lots of community members participated. I also participated for the first years. And there's lots of absence of information. Like for me, it took me a few years, and then I got to know the real history of that country, where you realize in the national anthem of Australia, it's called "We Are a Young Country," kind of denying the more than 80,000 years of the First Nations in that land. But also slowly, I realized more connection between even my own people from South Asia. I'm from Afghanistan originally, who went to Australia nearly 170 years ago. So this project, referring to that history, here we seeing some images. That one is a very iconic image. Shows a camel being a group of camel and cameliers arrived at Port Augusta, which is in South Australia, and this is 1893. So the first camelier brought to Australia in 1838, and their work, mostly the biggest work they've done was from 1860 until 1920, and they worked in many areas, including the railway line. So there's a long railway from South Australia to connecting to North Australia, and it takes you more than 3 days. It's very long railway, as well as like there's a overland telegraph line, and they were worked also in carrying goods, especially from mines, and because of their work, many towns like literally built and started. But their contribution was almost ignored. And for example, in here there's an image where shows how they were tried to become naturalized, but in almost all the cases they were refused, even if someone worked there for 50 years or 60 years, especially after 1901, where a policy passed called the White Australia Policy. And literally here like says, because you're a colored man, we cannot give you, you cannot be naturalized. So everything began in this place. This is a small iron pot, like an iron, like a very simple shed, which was one of the first mosques in Australia. It's in Broken Hill, about 12 hours drive from Sydney to there. And there, the first mosque was built in another place in South Australia, but there's no, the building totally collapsed, but this place is still running, and mostly thanks to one of the descendants called Aminullah Shamruz. He's known as Bobby. That's one of the things. Almost all of the names of cameliers were changed, and in many cases, like a shortened, and they were giving like an English name. And he decided to gather whatever objects left neighbors and also relatives. And in this humble place, he gathered like more than 100 objects, and including amongst them there's this beautiful rubab instrument. So rubab is an instrument which is in South Asia and also Central Asia. It played and it has history more than 1,000 years. So in the poems of Maulana Rumi or Amir Khosrow Dehlavi, and Bidal Dehlavi, there's lots of reference to rubab. And rubab also, it has connection to Sufism as well. So seeing that, and when I saw it first time, there was a sign which says santur, which is totally a different instrument. And then I had a conversation with Aminullah, and later actually they changed the name, so now it's called rubab. Seeing that was start a journey for me to trying to, mostly I wanted to find out who that musician was, who this rubab was belonged to, and also what songs and what poetry they may have played, and what poetry they written or listened to. And then so through that research I finally found that musician. So in this picture we see John Shearder holding the picture of his mother and his father, and his father is literally the musician, the one who this rubab belonged to him. And that's one of the last image we have of him. So this is like a really amazing discovery to say, look, this is a proof, although none of their songs and poetry were kept, but these musical instruments is a witness to show that, there were musicians, there were writers, there were poets. So when we search about the South Asian camellias and music, the connection to music, mostly that image will come up, which is showing a pianola, I think taken from a place to Western Australia. So pianola is like a Western instrument, and so that's the only image you can find. In a way, it shows like how the whole media and also literally everyone, they were not interested what the camellias themselves, what instruments they're playing, but only that image survived. And then there's one image here which shows that more likely this might be the Eid al-Fitr celebration, end of Ramadan, and here we see two musical instruments being played by the camellias, and so one of them is we call it so it's a type of a drum, and another one is a little harmonium. But also there's this beautiful image which taken by a researcher, which showing instrument called qaychak. It's quite similar to Saudi, I think you call it rubab. So it has that bow, rubaba. Yeah, it has that some similarity, but also quite different. And sadly, lots of those musical instruments, including this one, they no longer exist, because even the descendants, they didn't know like how important they are, and the whole thing was like, actually, your story is not important. So sadly, through time, almost all of them are destroyed. Or so here for the Biennale, I created this body of work which having the same rubab instruments, and then using neon having four verses from four different songs or poetry, referring to the diversity of languages of Kamilis. So Kamilis were mostly from today's Pakistan, today's Afghanistan, and India. And there were different ethnic backgrounds, including Baluchi, Pashto, and here, and also like the religion as well. Majority were Muslim background, but also there were Sufi, they're obviously Sufi of Muslim, but also Hindu and Sikh community, and at least one person from the Zarathustrian religion. Also, there is a series of collages work, which in this one inspired by a notebook I found, where it clearly shows that one of the Kamilis trying to teach the language to a younger Kamilia. So this is the first page, and it has about 100 pages. It's so it's so beautiful. At the same time, it's quite sad because sadly, those languages never survived, and the descendants totally forgot. And one of the reasons, which we can talk later, is because no women were allowed to come to Australia with the Kamilis, and mothers plays a big role to pass on the language. Every year there is a gathering of these descendants. So descendants are in all 5 main estates in Australia, and they gather in this town called Murray, Marree. It's in north of South Australia, about 9 hours drive from Adelaide. And every year there is the first day is a camel race, which is really interesting, and there are activities for children as well. Last time I went there, 2 people fell down from the camels, and it's really it's quite dangerous. Actually, it's quite. And then the second day is this beautiful gathering where they cook on the same pots and that they left from their Kamilis grandfathers, and also they have live music by their descendants, and they have fire. It's such a humble gathering, but it's really profound. This is a cemetery, which they call it, like the Muslim community back then were called Muhammadan, which is not a correct term, as well as the whole Kamilis community is known as Afghan Kamilia, which is also not correct because Kamilis were quite diverse. Later, I did some travels to places of where the Kamilis were come from. Went to Pakistan, in Karachi, and also to India and Kolkata and Rajasthan. And 2 main ports were used to bring the Kamilis to Australia. One of them was Karachi, another one Karachi port, and also Kolkata. And I'm continuing this research and finding some of the descendants. For example, I found one of the descendants in Lahore, Pakistan, where her grandfather was born in Perth, Australia, but was literally deported back to Pakistan after living there for many years. So those kind of connections are really, really important. And here is another descendant who also an amazing musician called Lal Zada. I think this is good for the start. Thank you.
Thank you, Elyas. Actually, before we move to Yazan, maybe if you don't mind, since everyone has seen bits of the installation, what is assembled together in this installation here? Because you've got a video, you've got photo montages of collages of sorts, You've got sculptural instruments, well, rubabs with neon. So if you could just maybe quickly also take us through what is coming together in this exhibition.
Yeah, so so in this case, I kind of wanted the audience to feel a sense of, the sounds of, hearing the sounds of rubab playing. In the video that you will see, I work with a musician who's the rubab playing being passed on to them generation after generation. And usually, like in countries like Afghanistan, musicians are having a very, very difficult, tough life. They get, both the governments, but also the society. Actually, in Afghanistan, there's a term called sazanda, which is kind of saying, actually, what you're doing is like something for fun. It's not serious. So there's so much sacrifice there. So working with this amazing musician, and he plays for this video, it's really amazing. And then I wanted to find looking at those fragments of this history are so much about the things that have not been recorded, the things that are absent, and so putting together a scene from Australia next to a scene in Rajasthan and finding a connection between them is like kind of in a poetic way. I try to say, look, there is this invisible connection between them, so in a way, I feel like put collages and neon works together. Also, the neon work, I love the fragility of the neon, and also how there's human breath is involved in making the neon works. And in a way, I wanted to show how these objects become a symbol. It's an archive itself, and how by having poetry on them, as if kind of like there has that ghostly quality to it, with the glow of neon, and that fragility is very important in this work.
Thank you. I think that's a very beautiful evocation of what we're seeing and experiencing. Yazan, over to you about your new commission in the Biennale.
Thank you, Sabih, and thank you, Elyas, and thank you, Sabih and the whole curatorial team, May, Man, and everyone else, for the opportunity also to realize something that I have been thinking of and sketching for a while. The work that you see here, we learned our language in our dreams. Oh yeah. Yeah, this is one of the photos. I have to say, I just gathered any 10 photos I found, and so I'm gonna actually move between them. Sometimes go forward and backwards to formulate a kind of idea. But the work is a continuation of a series of works that I have been occupied with. Question about how do we, in the first attempt that I worked with, it was a question about how do we understand facial recognition in relation to its historical existence in ethnography and in anthropology, and the way the human face has been used as a way to recognize what's a human in the colonial era, and then how this is coming back now in the time of technology, where facial recognition became a kind of signifier of who is a human and which human is this. So that was in another work that you will see here, where I went to museums, and while I was taking photos of the masks in museums, the masks began to, my mobile began to give these yellow squares around masks. And suddenly I began seeing faces, you know, like, of course they are faces, but suddenly they are human faces too. And then I began placing them on people's faces, and I was trying to find ways to, or asking, how can we disappear in the time of facial recognition? You know, how do we perform our disappearance? And another work I did was this one. It's called Medusa. I was also taking that a step forward and trying to understand the screen itself as a medium that stands in the middle between this physical world we live and a digital world, and how do we relate to it? How does reality go in, or how does the fiction come out? So these kind of connections between the digital and the real. And in this latest work, I like your work, so I was trying to. I also worked with screens, with structures. I come from architecture background, so I also wanted to bring my kind of understanding of the tensions between the structures that hold the content and the content themselves, how they are working together or against each other, or how they are opposite, kind of skewering each other. So if you saw the work, you would have seen that every structure holding the video is at the same time skewering it. But my question here comes at a time of two big events that's, I think, shaping mine and I think many people's understanding of the world we live in. On one side, it's the AI, and on the other side, it's the genocide. And these two things, for me, are very defining my practice, my being, my political being, in the sense that how do we speak politically at a time where everything we speak can be devoured through these machines? You know, what's the form of language that we can bring through which we can communicate without, at the same time, feeding this machine of like feeding it our political existence and our political speech to be used most probably against us. I don't want to sound very techno hater or technophobic, techno-racist, but at the same time, how things are unfolding, that these two big events are forcing one to have to think of how do we approach language, and maybe not only language as a kind of signifier, but language as the meaning that exists within the language itself. No? So my attempt in these works is to also create a form of language through which meaning can only be understood from the position of the viewer. So it's never a clear structure, or a clear meaning that unfolds through the video, as much as how the viewer, when they enter the work, and this is one of the, I think, abilities of video work, that they are always on loop. that the minute the viewer enters the work, meaning begins to appear for the viewer from their position, from their time. And this, for me, forms a form of poetic relation to language, because it begins from the individual, from their position at that moment of entering the work. So I'll explain something here about learning from seeing the work, but for myself. But so the work here is that attempt to find ways in which I can approach language through challenging or through pushing against total meaning, against its understandability, or that there's a total understandable one way of understanding language, but that rather that language can be only understood from a certain position. And I keep thinking a lot about poetry in the sense that poetry is, I think of it as a way through which a meaning can be produced based on when you read it, how you read it. It's not already given, it's not already structured within the way it's written, but rather in the way it unfolds. So I'm gonna jump this. So for example, these are one of the videos that I'm trying to do that. Although in this one, another tactic I was doing, which is writing, first of all, and it's written in English, my second language. And it's not my first language, I speak Arabic. The more, my normal poetics, my reading of poetry always happens in English. I have, in Arabic, I cannot taste English. It's really, it is a foreign language to me. And I used it in these cases because it is that language that I'm always in challenge, or I'm always unable to own it. So I use it, and I use it in a way that I write very, very, very long sentences. So every text in these videos is a one long looping sentence that doesn't end. And this comes from living in between two languages. Whenever I write in English, they tell me you have to make your sentences shorter because that's how English is written. Whereas in Arabic, there's a way to keep on rotating the sentence and the word. And sometimes you write 3-4 lines of one sentence. So I took that relation to Arabic and tried to bring it into English in a way that whatever is written in these texts is also something that doesn't make sense in English itself. Structurally, it doesn't make sense. So like, and even I took the text and put it in AI to see, and it always gave it back to me with apostrophes, making it shorter, making it, and that gave me like, okay, comfort, like, okay, they don't understand. But so this is these are attempts to work with language, but also these languages have to be shown in these texts are shown on screens. They are always obscured. There's always a hand, which we always, I think, if you are using our phones, the relation with our screen is always through the hand. So the hand here has many different beings. Something obscures, it moves things, gesture. The hand and the language, or the image that comes through the language, it's very something that I keep seeing it. I cannot not see my hand when I am looking at my phone, for example. So I put these photos because I was amazed by the production. So I'm an architect, and again, I worked as a production, and I always think, seeing how a production team produces the works is something that needs to be appreciated. So I really put these photos as a thank you to the production team. Look, the beauty. That people, we don't look at it usually. We come to look at the videos, but this is the real work. I don't know why I put these. So the tunnel it belongs to maybe another discussion. Also here, so there's always this text that keeps coming out and being obscured by another landscape or another image, and then it comes back again. Text being written on a Polaroid, the text disappears. It begins from disappearance to appearance. Yeah, I should stop.
So
I'll stop now and maybe.
No, it's beautiful. Thank you very much, both of you. You want to say something? Add something?
No, maybe when we talk, I want to also talk about the structure itself.
Yes,
but
I was going to come to that. In fact, I mean, it's nice that Yazan mentions the structure and the production, the engineering of this, because he was very conscious about wanting to make visible the welding marks, make visible the joints. And to make visible the joints is actually to make visible the disjointedness. And I think there's something about the fragment in both of your works. When we had this initial conversation between Yazan and Elyas and I, both of them said something very beautiful at different times without even riffing off each other, which was the work is actually a search for poetry. When they both started this work, the search for poetry. You said the work is a search for poetry, Yazan. So, and in saying that, basically, like I mentioned in the introduction, that for Yazan, it's a search for poetry as a means of resistance against the excess of language, and in Elyas's case, the search for poetry as a mode of resistance against erasure. And both of these works, I mean, you can see the interesting circumstances in which poetry gets deployed in these kinds of ways. But I wanted to ask you, because we have very little time, and that's the only question I'll be able to ask, then open the floor, of your relationship with fragments, a fragmentation of identity, a fragmentation of places, because one is in disjointed experiences of life, realities, exiles, and how that makes you relate to language as a site of reclamation, but while still acknowledging the fragmentation that's there. I just want to add a small thing just to contextualize this question, which is that Yazan, for instance, recounted how, in an earlier conversation, how, in fact, the way so many histories from Palestine in the face of such erasure could be preserved is their dispersal, is their distribution through so many other channels. So you find pockets of language and pockets of histories that then becomes the work of Yazan and many other colleagues to start piecing together and finding meaning and finding solidarity in some sense of the histories that are being kind of annihilated. And in Elyas's case, again, piecing together very broken histories, very broken fragments of language, but also different languages and how they can congeal into forming a certain solidarity or unity of a community. So maybe if you can just answer very briefly, because we don't have much time and we want to open the floor, your relationship with the idea of fragmentation.
I think what you said was...
that's all that needs to be said? No,
I mean, yeah, again, I think, yes, under the pressure of imperial powers right now, I think fragmentation allows to a certain ability to find history not in the material itself, but by connections, connections. And that always you do it under the fear that some relations are lost and you might not be able to recover them. But you do it because our abilities to maintain a kind of a centralized body that keeps memory is always a threat that this body itself will be attacked and destroyed. So this fragmentation, this creating these pockets, is this attempt to fight against that kind of oppressive and continuous pressure on memory and on history or our ability to tell it. But again, I think by now we understand these tactics. It's not like it's happening as like only as a reactionary tactics. It's also becoming a way through which a whole world is growing. That these kind of ideas of centrality, I don't want, of course, and this idea of the state as the only depository of knowledge of history is also being challenged. It's challenged from the top, from the the big corporations, but also it's challenged with the grassroots or people's histories. And as someone, I think that I would like to belong. I would like to belong to the people's history, and one does it in a total consciousness of how relations, how language, how stories, how small pieces of history that are put here and there always find way to come together at certain moments and disperse when they need to.
Just like following what you said as well, like I think there's many things, but if I refer to like one memory where in a cemetery in Murray, which has the biggest, there are many Cameliers buried there. I go there every year, and sometimes with my friends who are First Nations and also Camelier heritage. Sometimes we go and literally looking at those gravestones, and we trying to piece it together, because there's like fragments of stories and a few images and like the system says there's nothing to look at, they're not important, therefore we can, the rise of Islamophobia in Australia is really high. Like literally, recently a law passed in Queensland where if someone carry a sentence like from river to the sea, literally you go to jail, and they do it. At the same time, the third largest party, the leader openly says there is no good Muslim. Literally openly says that. But I think that those conversations, like me reading the Farsi part in that gravestone, and also like we decoding the Arabic part, and then he telling me about the English part. I think these fragments become bigger, and there's so many of those fragments, which once it brings together, it's like it becomes a big fragments, and I think that's the beauty of like how we as artists, as writers, as poets, we have this power to at least try it, at least to but that simple having this work made, finally the historical society in Broken Hill, they gave some shelves, for example, for this museum, because before literally snakes could come in and everyone could go and take any of these precious objects, but now at least they're safe.
Thank you both. We have 5 minutes, so I'm going to take 3 questions, and all together, and then we'll have them answer. So only if it's a pressing question, raise your hand. Yes, now there'll be no questions. I might just answer a question.
Easy questions.
Okay, it can be an easy question.
If there isn't,
yeah.
Can also
Continue, yeah, sure, but I think, yes.
I have one question for you, Yazan, because the title of your work refers to dreams, and I'd be curious to know what's the place of dreams exactly in your process and in your work.
That's a tough question. Okay, so this is something that I wanted to say. I'll say it later. I only saw the work in Aristotle is yesterday, because you produced this work in fragments in the studio in Amsterdam, and you send it here, and then the production of the structures is happening here, and this is for me very it's a real experience that most of the times I never saw my work, because sometimes it's shown abroad and I'm in Palestine and then I cannot travel to see it. So the work always happens elsewhere. So the work is always in itself a dream, that you think you've seen it once, but you're not sure where, because you've never seen it. You have imagined it. So when I did this work, I was already thinking that I might never see it again, or might never see it. And that made me really be also interested in the way that I work with text. Because there's something in AI, in the artificial intelligence, that there's no one text that will come twice. So this learning a language in our dreams, you don't have, there's no dream that comes twice. It doesn't repeat itself. So there's this relation between the language and the dream that they don't, although there's these structures that we can think of or speak through, but they do not produce, again, the same meaning that they have produced before. So that's a very, I'm not sure if my answer is correct, but again, I always think of language that's something that is very open to interpretation, open to memory, open again to your political position to it, or your position to any to the language that you are seeing in front of you. So I try to create a title.
Beautiful, thank you. Cool. I think that this somewhat also connects very beautifully to an area that all of us on the curatorial team and with artists we were exploring, which was an idea of orality, not oral only, but oral histories. Because just like Yazan right now said, you never dream the same dream twice. You never speak the same thing twice either. You may even use the same word, but it may mean different things every time you've uttered it. And that is the nature of orality, that everything is so present, situated, contextual, that it never means the same thing. And therefore, it is so contextual, and therefore, I think the way both Elyas and Yazan approach language is not in its fixity, but in its non-fixity, in its constant permutations and combinations based on the position you take towards it. Any other question? We have 1 minute, 38 seconds. I'm mindful of time because we have a lineup now back to back, and I don't want to lose out on any of the future panels. Anything? You want to add anything, or can I say something as well? You have 1 minute, 20 seconds.
No,
no, go for it, go for it.
No, that's so...
It's AI time. Precision. We're losing time in this. Go for it, Yazan.
No, I don't know. I just wanted to also try something which maybe it will happen in future work. It's like to create a kind of a sculpture that goes from the physical world through the screen into the digital in a continuity. This is an attempt. Maybe this we can discuss it one-to-one later if anyone has something to do. If what I said made sense, if anyone connects to this, come speak to me. Because I'm really, searching for a way to understand this connection between this digital world, the internet, the world that's inside the screen, and the physical world that we live in right now. I'm de-learning many things. I'm de-learning social media, for example. And this is a very weird relation. Like I feel many times I am taking myself from this world that's inside, pulling myself out to a world where I'm more attentive to what's around me. And other times, I'm jumping inside the screen and I live there. So this work is an attempt to create this continuity, this
across registers, yeah.
But it's supposed to be seamless. Like you don't know if it's inside or that's outside. And I wonder if maybe someone wants to discuss it later, like after this 28 seconds.
Actually, the next talk by Rohini Devasher is going to look at the complexity between inside and outside and deep time and wormholes of the kind you just described. One of the films that we talked about, picking up on Mahalu's question about dreams, was this Australian filmmaker, German filmmaker, Werner Herzog, making a film in Australia called Where Green Ants Dream. And because his work was about dreams and Elyas was looking at language and displacement, it's a community trying to protect their land from being occupied by a business corporation and setting up a factory. And they want to protect it not because they want to protect their homes, because on that land, green ants are dreaming and we can't wake them up. They wake up, the whole universe will end. And so they were trying to protect the whole universe by preventing the green ants from waking up. A lot more happens in this film, but for that you'll have to watch it. But on that note of thinking about the universe, we're going to switch to our next talk. Thank you very much, Yazan. Thank you, Elyas. And thank you all very much for joining us. We take a 5-minute pause if you want to quickly use the restroom, if you want to have a drink of water, coffee. We meet here in 5. Thank you.